IBM's announcement of IBM Climate Control Diamondback. I'm Sean Brumet. I'm joined by some analysts, and I'm going to give those analysts an opportunity to introduce themselves before we get started talking about the announcement. Let's get started. Fred, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll get going from there.
Yeah, my name's Fred Moore. I'm a storage analyst. I've got my own analyst company, Horizon Information Strategies, and I've spent my entire professional career in the storage industry and really centered around lately secondary storage and the incredible changes that are going on there. That's where most of the world's data sits, and that's where our attention has been focused a lot lately. So this is right in line with exactly where I spend my time, and I'm delighted to be here.
Great. Brad Johns.
Hi, Sean. I'm Brad Johns. I also have my own consulting company, cleverly named Brad Johns Consulting. I've been in the industry a little over 40, approaching 45 years now. I started with IBM in the sales of data processing division, worked through a number of different careers in IBM, ending with storage in Tucson. I've been focusing initially my practice on financial analysis and looking at total cost of ownership. But in the last few years, with the focus on sustainability, I've been spending increasing amounts of time looking at electrical consumption, cooling requirements, and e-waste associated with various storage alternatives.
Great. Rich Gadomski.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Sean. My name's Rich Gadomski. I'm with Fujifilm North America Corp. I wouldn't call myself an analyst, but I have been in sales and marketing of data tape for 34 years. Like John Monroe likes to say, I have a unique resume, but glad to join the conversation here today. Thanks.
Great. And last but not least, John Monroe, please.
Hi, John Monroe. Also delighted to be here. Also, like my learned colleagues Fred and Brad, have my own little consulting firm. After being in the storage industry for, hate to admit it, 45 years now. Early part of my career, I spent in the dirty ditch of the VAR channel, buying and selling mostly hard disk drives, but all grades of storage products as well. So unlike many analysts, I've actually had balance sheet accountability for the stuff that I studied. From 1997 through 2022, 25 years, I was with Gartner. I analyze the future and the past of really all storage products, but primarily hard disk drives, solid state drives, and tape, insofar as I related primarily as my career lingered on with the enterprise. And that's what I study now, the size, shape, and future of what I like to call the dataverse. And it's kind of an exception, and it is infinitely self-similar, never the same. And there are going to be so many different ways to try to get at the staggering immensity of an active archive that grows by incalculable amounts every day.
Great, great insight on the growth of data. So let me just pose out the first thing. As we see data centers continue to focus on energy consumption and controlling heat, and we hear so much about not only the amount of energy, but everything that goes in line with energy from an environmental point of view to control these data centers. What do you see as the most influencing in the changes coming about for data centers? Do you think it's being driven by the corporations themselves, the organizations, the public, or regulatory influences? Or do you think it's something else? You know what? Let me open it up to Fred to start on that one.
I'm going to take a shot at that and say the public. Living in Boulder, Colorado, there's a lot of scientific and technical people here. And in conversations I hear at the gym and where I work out and everything else, people around town are talking about data centers and their energy consumption, and they're not IT people. The general public now is very much aware of this. The media has put a ton out in print on the entire environmental situation around data centers, new data centers. We have two trying to go into Denver right now that have been blocked because there's not enough water in this state, even for the people, let alone data centers. So it is it's a public issue now. It's beyond us at this screen where we live in this world. These other people are all aware and talking about data centers, power, energy. What's going on with AI? Why does it have to suck up every energy and resource on our planet right now? And I think it's beyond the world of IT. The general public is fully engaged in what AI and data centers are doing right now to us.
Great. That's a great perspective. Brad, can you bring a little bit of your perspective? You said you're focusing in this area, maybe not just on who or what the influence is, but what do you feel the impacts are and how does it have to change?
Well, it's been interesting, and things are moving really quick. And I think the key driver is generative AI. There's been nothing really on the scene like that we've seen. Maybe we go back to the beginning of the internet, but it's just kind of exploded onto the scene. It's pervasive. It's on every desktop. Kids are using it in high school now to do their homework. So it's kind of unprecedented. And what I think has happened over the last 2 or 3 years, to Fred's point, is it started off nobody knew what was going on outside of the people that were building the data centers. And now it's starting to become a real issue. I went to one conference where an organization said, they were talking about, well, where do you place data centers? And he said, and his comment was, all the low-hanging fruit is done. We've got that. All the easy ones have already got either the data centers there or it's already being built. So they're really looking for areas there. To Fred's point, Tucson just turned one down because of the water consumption issue. But the way we're organized politically is the city doesn't have veto power if you get land with groundwater rights. So that doesn't mean the hunt is over. So it's become a public issue. I think it was people really didn't understand what was going on. It moved extremely quickly just because of the acceptance of AI. And now it's become an issue for the public, and I would say for state and local government. McKinsey just published a paper on how do you manage data centers from a state and local government perspective.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great input. Now, on to tape in those environments, we've been talking a little bit about, hey, these data centers are getting warmer, they're using more energy. Tape's got its own challenges, of course, and it traditionally hasn't just been media, it hasn't just been the hardware, it's been the overall usage was really designed around what we might call the traditional enterprise data center, right? The interior is, let's say it's 67 degrees Fahrenheit or something in the 13 to 16 range for Celsius. With that challenge, it means that many data centers are deploying tape, but they can only do it by deploying tape rooms, right? And that, of course, is a big challenge. So IBM stepped up to that challenge. We recognized quite a while ago that this was going to be a focus of the industry as change came about. And as a result, we've got the IBM Climate Control Diamondback release. Now, this is not just a iteration on Diamondback. Diamondback was designed from day one, knowing that at some point in time, we were going to make major changes around how we deployed tape. So as an overview, let me just state, this is the first library that's specifically designed for any elevated temperature or humidity data center. Now, are there excursions that could happen? Of course, we're talking about normal operations. And we estimate today that this is going to reduce the cost of tape in adiabatic type data centers where we're really lifting that heat index, because you're no longer going to have to build tape rooms. This makes it to where you can deploy tape anywhere, anytime, without planning specific data center requirements. The other thing that we've seen in the past is an excursion risk. And here in a minute, I'm going to pass to Rich, talk a little bit about physical media itself. But This reduces the risk of excursion by 90%. And how do we come up with that? We came up with that in that today, if there's a rapid change in the environment, tape media is susceptible to that change. It can then change in size. It's called PES, but that's something we're not going to get into here. And this controls those excursions. It prevents the humidity from changing too quickly. Matter of fact, it tries to eliminate the humidity as much as possible from changing, as well as not allowing heat changes to happen rapidly. And as a result of making these changes, we've also taken the entire library. There's not a panel on it that's original, and we've made it a neutral pressure sealed library. That means that external debris, the air never really flows across the overall environment. And that's going to, of course, prevent anything from getting into the media. And you retain all of the benefits of tape. This brings me to, some people don't understand the challenges of physical media. And I'm going to pass that one to Rich, because Rich, you're right in line with talking about physical media. Can you give us just a short insight around some of the challenges you've seen being in the media industry related to this?
Well, sure thing, Sean. And, media has been around for, tape media has been around for 70 plus years. And it is extremely resilient, extremely reliable, and has a pretty wide environmental operating range. I think what's changing today is that some of these data centers, particularly larger ones who are operating at scale, because of the energy challenges that we talked about, they do want to run hotter and more humid. And that's obviously just to conserve, energy consumption, air conditioning.
Right.
So, as you approach some of those upper limits in terms of temperature and humidity, that's not an ideal environment for tape. So, this solution that you're talking about, would definitely, mitigate those higher temperatures and humidity. But I really see this, as data centers want to run hotter, want to run more humid, as a great solution.
Continuing our overview real quick, this is a very simple demonstration of what's happening, but in the library, we're actually not doing air exchange. We're keeping all of the air that's in the library, once it's there, recirculating. So we're not trying to do a great big air exchange, which that's how we're reducing the amount of external debris that could get in, as well as controlling the environment, because it's a lot easier to cool slightly cooled air, right? John, you've known the Diamondback for quite a while, and I wanted to get your input, knowing the capacity of this, and we'll just hit that really quick. With LTO-10 40 terabyte cartridges, the latest announcement, a single IBM Diamondback is 61.9 petabytes of uncompressed data in, let's call it 0.78 square meters. That's a ton of data. It's 150 petabytes at 2.5 to 1. As you're looking at massive data in archives, because we know you focused on the industry overall, how do you see the climate control changing the perspective of keeping this data for a long period of time?
Well, I think we've touched on a mass of critical issues here. Not only what's driving this, and my own personal acronym is sustainability, immutability, and security, all of which tape has. And the whole sustainability issue really meshes pretty seamlessly with the environmental concerns, with heat, with cost, with availability of power. And the fact that this is a system that actually does play in more environments, A, B, takes up less space per petabyte, and C, does not in any way contribute to the heat issues in any data center, I think are pretty crucial concerns. Another one is that I just think that the driving force, yes, Fred, you're absolutely correct. It is becoming far more prevalent in the public mind. In the end, the CFOs are going to have the final say. And one of the interesting things at the inflection point we're at now, is that what is the best solution also happens to be the best economic solution and the solution that is most environmentally friendly. So I think, there's going to be a lot more people driven to this type of technology and to other emerging technologies because of environmental issues, as well as the square petabytes per square inch is the way the big data centers measure this. That's one of the reasons that the data centers, the big ones, the hyperscale data centers, move so fast to every evolving capacity of hard drive. From 10 terabyte to 12 terabyte, big difference. So they go, times 10,000 drives is a big difference in terms of petabytes per square inch. So no, I think the fact that this is a self-contained system designed intelligently from the ground up to be really to be a non-supplier, a non-sucker up both energy and be a non-polluter in the environment and a non-contributor to the overall heat and energy scale.
Yeah, excellent. I really like that input. You brought up a great point, and I'm going to reemphasize this and send it back to the group. The CFOs ultimately make the change, and IBM did a lot of research around that. How do we balance the cost of adding on to a library? Tape is low cost from the beginning, while also supporting those environments. And we think we've positioned that very well to be beneficial from day one for all users. Now, I kind of made another announcement here, which is scheduled for the same time, and that was the 40 terabyte LTO-10 cartridge. Rich, can you tell us a little bit about that cartridge and how it contributes to our journey here around making tape more usable? It doesn't have to be long. Love a short one.
Yeah, we're very excited about the new 40 terabyte premium cartridge or enterprise cartridge, and it does have a innovative base film that allows it to reach different corners and extremes of the environmental operating ranges. So it is capable of excursions into higher temperatures and higher humidity. So that helps in that environmental issue and concern, and certainly dovetails nicely with the climate control Diamondback.
The LTO-10 allowable is in the blue space on our psychometric chart, and with IBM Diamondback and LTO-10 media, which expands that environment, we're now looking at areas like ASHRAE A4 climate control for Diamondback. I mean, pretty much humans not going to operate in that environment. It's only going to be hardware that's operating in that. Looking at IBM Diamondback, we talked a little bit about the impacts of climate control and the impacts of the data centers. When you see how IBM's done this, you can see the integration. What's your first impression when you heard about this? Fred, let me send it to you.
Yeah, I got a chance to look over the slides, and my first impression was the timing is excellent, given what we see with AI, energy, and this whole conversation we just had. My other observation is I believe I saw that there is no option for expansion modules. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's going to maintain that same footprint idea that every library deploys as a pod of data.
Okay. So I wanted to make clear on what your thinking was on that rather than the hyperscalers who may want to just add modules, but that may have some financial implications on growth. I don't know. The environmental trade-offs may well be worth that, of course. And the third thing is I'd love to know, because Rich and I just got done doing a big piece on this for the Active Archive Alliance, but what are your thoughts, Sean, on where you want to put this in the Active Archive conversation? That was my third thing. I think it's the great archive component of that, and the active part is what we're looking to address here with this, and what that would look like. But with 1,500 cartridges in there, and you have 14 tape drives, that's about 110 slots per drive, and that's a great ratio. Actually, we used to always, when we did all the configurations for libraries at Storage Tech, it always ran 150 to 350 slots per drive was the ideal configuration. So you're more active basically in this architecture just by the way it can be set up. So anyway, around performance and access time in and out of here, is it deep archive? Is it active archive? Is it going to be both? I know you've got it positioned on your slide as deep archive.
I'm gonna chime in there, and I'm gonna use John Monroe's statement. This is deep but accessible for sure, right? Tape is down in the archives of being available, especially now as we're positioning it. As you can see, we're gonna offer it with and without the top rack, and we're gonna operate with the intention to allow IBM Deep Archive, our S3 to tape solution, to be installed as an appliance with this. Now, today we say Azure A2. We're changing our servers in order to make that an A3, increase the environment. I see this as well positioned as regulatory requirements in Europe change and push up the temperature of data centers. Traditional clients want to keep their data, and they keep it on tape. And by making it more accessible while also putting it into the environments that they are getting told they have to run, we think we're very well positioned. So we are going to offer it across our portfolio, supported next to everything else. But what we've done is change the use case. And when I look at changing that use case, I quoted John there with the deep but accessible. Going to Brad, you're in Tucson. It's always hot in Tucson. Briefly, how do you see this change the dynamic? I mean, you just talked about a data center being told, hey, we don't want you. Do you think this helps them out, especially with archive data?
Well, I that was kind of my initial impression. I think some of the most expensive real estate in the world are new data centers. And the fact that you can get away from having to provide a unique environment for tape in one of these hyperscale environments, that's a real two aspects. That's number one, a financial plus. You don't have to build a separate building at the very expensive rate at which it costs to build one. And it removes an inhibitor, so you can just put it into the existing footprint that you're building, which is a big deal. And the environmental requirements being minimized, that is a major challenge, especially in Arizona. And they're wrestling with actually looking at it, trying to move to an entirely air-cooled data center and minimize the amount of water. But the side effect of that with current technology is that you need a lot more energy. So there are trade-offs. But so by minimizing all those different impacts, I think this really makes it easier for large data centers to exploit tape and really take advantage of the sustainability aspects and, of course, the cost benefits of moving that active data onto tape.
Excellent. And I know that you and John Monroe have done a ton on that. John, I'm going to pose the next question for you to fire us off, because I think, especially with the work you've done recently, that this is very well positioned. Provide us, and I'm going to pose this out to everybody kind of as our closing question and allow everybody to do a comment on this. Provide us with your perspective on data growth, archiving, and AI, and how is balancing performance and archive durability of data influencing the market, and how do you think that it relates to Diamondback with climate control Diamondback?
Well, a multifaceted question indeed. We are in the midst of what Fred has referred to as a vertical market meltdown crisis. I've referred to it for really more than 10 years at Wall Street and elsewhere. So, the coming petabyte crisis is going to make the Thai floods look like a mini event. Well, it's here. Right now, hard drive manufacturers are quoting more than 1 year lead time on high capacity drives. SSDs, which were in probably the greatest surplus ever a year and a half ago, are now equally rare. So another thing that's going to drive this is I need the capacity, and I just can't get it on hard drives or solid state drives, period. Another thing that's driving this is that I've increasingly thought of everything's an active archive. There is no such thing as cold data now, partially thanks to AI. Fred, you've mentioned this in your presentations. I mentioned it in papers that Brad and I worked on together. There is no such thing as a cold data. Every bit of data can become hot AI because it's there. Most corporations will throw nothing away for years, if not decades, in the hopes that Gen AI does make real the possibility that by some new configuration, by some new angle at which we view this data, it becomes valuable. It doesn't become a cold piece that's never ever going to be accessed or have any value. So I think those things, all of those are combining to drive us right now. And look at what Seagate and WD stocks have done. They've more than tripled in value in the last 6 months.
Right.
So at last, Wall Street is coming alive to the fact that, well, hard disk drives are not going to get killed by flash by any means, certainly not within the next decade. And also, I think part of what would be driving this is the environmental factor and the economic factor. It is a hard fact that we're putting way too much active archive type of data on hard drives at enormous expense, both in terms of cost per gigabyte and in terms of environmental impact and energy. So I think it's going to drive, it should be driving the market increasingly towards tape. And again, not only do you have the economic factor, but also the availability. You just can't get it at the moment. It takes a long time, even the big hyperscalers. And the prices are obviously going up. We're seeing hard disk drive gross margins above 40%. That ain't never happened, ever. Okay. And that also means that they're increasingly not such a good deal compared with tape, but even worse deal compared with tape. So all those things should drive a lot of customers toward tape that in the recent past have not even been considering it. You're on mute, Sean.
That's great input. And pushing this up to Rich, because, we just heard from John, HDDs have a year lead time, SSDs are looking the same way, data needs to go there. What about tape? What about media? We never hear anybody reporting on that. Are we seeing the same thing in the media industry for tape? As far as backlog, are we backlogged on tape?
I don't think we're backlogged on tape. I know that if you look at what LTO.org has reported, tape industry is continuing to ship more and more petabyte capacity. And we continue to innovate in the media, offering higher capacity cartridges. The LTO 40 terabyte premium is a great example that you mentioned is recently being introduced. So I think and we have a roadmap, that goes out to over 500 terabytes. And people often ask me, is that really going to be required? And when you look at the forecast that John and Brad have worked on, by 2050, we could be looking at anywhere between 250 and on a conservative 250 zettabytes. 1 zettabyte is 33 million HDDs. And if we follow the historic growth rate of 25%, we're looking at 2 yottabytes. we're going to be in the yottabyte era by 2050, if not earlier, 2045. So that's a tremendous amount of data. Active archive is definitely the strategic way to manage it. It means maintaining your accessibility, but reducing your costs in terms of energy, total cost of ownership, cost per terabyte, CO2e reduction, e-waste reduction. So it becomes very, very strategic. And just to circle back quickly to Fred's first comment, I mean, the cost of energy in the state of New Jersey, the electrical bills that consumers are paying, where I live, is going through the roof. And on the evening news, they say it's because of data centers and artificial intelligence. So it's becoming a public issue, and data centers need to become more strategic in terms of how they manage this data growth, the volumes of data, the installed base. And I think tape and the innovation that's happening in tape, between things like the climate control Diamondback and new LTO10 media, is a great solution. So, looking forward to continuing the work to promote the tape options.
Around those all, we've kind of centered into a financial thing, Fred. Can you bring that discussion in around longevity and finances and what's going to have to happen there? Why tape is really from my perspective, tape's the only viable option today for long term. Doesn't mean the future doesn't change, because we don't know the future, but how do you see it financially?
There's a huge cost in storage to remaster data from old technology to new technology, and with tape, you don't have to do it that often. Tape media lasts longer by its design, and I am very curious here to see what a controlled environment will do to the media and drives and bit error rate and reliability of that technology. This media may last longer, Rich, than the 30 or 50-year numbers that you see out here, and this could be your permanent long-term archive if tape can show us that in a totally controlled environment, it is much more reliable than ever. I wonder if the bit error rates are going to go way up and the media life will be extended because of a consistent environment. So economically, that has a big influence on how quickly you have to migrate to something new. On disk, a migration is every 5, 6 years, whatever now. It could be in there, and here we have a less frequent version of that. I think it plays into a major economic play there with how you manage your media and the resources required. As your data centers get bigger every year, you've got more data to migrate forward to some new technology. Anything we can do to minimize the remastering, and as you said, Sean, the permanence is a big plus here. So I think one of the tangential effects here is going to be a much higher reliable environment that tape has, and the stage is set for tape. Energy's a big AI's doing it. Tape is here to solve a problem that AI has only exacerbated beyond anything we ever imagined before. And everybody on this screen knows how bad this has become.
Yeah, and I have to agree, right? Moving data over, if you've got to keep it, keeping it in an environment that's easy to control. And of course, with new solutions for tape and everybody moving to things like object storage, all of a sudden it obfuscates that movement, makes that migration a little bit easier, because it's no longer controlled by this big ISV. Around longevity, hardware and finances, it comes back to one thing, I think. All of that circles back to the sustainability of our technologies. Where do we draw the lines? Brad, with your recent works, how do you see that with what everybody else has said, wrapping this up with a sustainability message? What do you see?
Well, I think the value proposition for tape only has gotten stronger as organizations are wrestling with the immense amount of data they're being asked to basically store and manage. I'd add that this announcement makes the ability to exploit tape even easier, which is, in today's world, easy is definitely good, because people don't have the time or the energy to put into trying to create unique environments. I guess the one other aspect of this is pretty exciting is the 40 terabyte tape. It kind of changes a lot of the math here. I'm going to have to go back to my financial models.
It's been a great effort by the industry to continue to grow tape, right? And meet those capacity challenges.
Yeah, I think the one other aspect, and this kind of touches on Fred's point, is if e-waste is a real issue with the number of hard disk drives that are retired each year, There's really, in today's world, there's not a lot of good things to do with them. You can try to disassemble them and harvest it, but it's all expensive to do. And with tape, if you're starting to talk about 10, maybe 15 years useful life, that's a lot of e-waste that you've eliminated. You don't have 2 or 3 generations of hard disk drives that you need to remove and disposition in some fashion. And we captured a little bit, I think, in the last paper we did, but this announcement, if we have a prolonged life, would kind of change that to the benefit of tape.
Definitely. You know, I thank all of you for taking your time today. Just as a wrap up, Climate Control Diamondback announcing on November 11th, available this quarter. It retains all those benefits of the current Diamondback, which is non-climate controlled, with 14 drives, 1,548 cartridges with up to 61.9 uncompressed petabytes per library. It does come pre-installed with the media if you like, and climate control, as a reminder, for the Diamondback is not an add-on. This is a unique product designed to carry tape forward. And with that, I'm going to wrap us up. I thank all of you very much for taking your time today, and I look forward to the next announcement of IBM products. All right.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Excellent.